I am Amy Vetter, and welcome to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. This valuable time is for you to pause in your day and go on your own self-journey. Discover the beliefs that are holding you back from living your best life at work and at home. Learn from the guests on this show as they share their inspirational stories on how they found ways to break internal beliefs that were no longer serving them. Because if you believe you can, you will. And our podcast begins now. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs, where I interview Michelle Golden-River. Michelle is a CPA firm growth and profitability strategist with specialties in both pricing models and positioning. She began helping CPAs with their pricing models in the early 2000s while she owned a marketing agency, and pricing was one of the many critical growth strategies. Today, pricing is her full-time passion. She has a knack to relate and energize people while she shows them how to do new things. She clarifies the complicated and turns theory into practical application. And she sheds new light, instills confidence, and inspires. A longtime consultant and former top 100 CPA firm partner, Michelle is recognized across the accounting profession for her original ideas and proven success implementing various new business, revenue, and growth models. Some honors she has is she's one of the 10 most powerful women in accounting by Accounting Today. She's one of the 25 most powerful women in accounting by CPA Practice Advisor. She's one of the top 100 most influential people in accounting by Accounting Today, and one of the top 25 thought leaders in public accounting by CPA Practice Advisor. In 2004, Michelle was appointed as a senior fellow of VeraSage Institute, the think tank, to focus on advancing the knowledge in the profession. In 2008, she earned the International Association of Facilitators Certified Professional Facilitator designation, which aids her in helping firms gain solid buy-in to propel their change initiatives. During this interview with Michelle, we discuss her unconventional upbringing and her career journey in the accounting space, the challenges and importance of transitioning from charging by the hour to a more worth-based pricing model, and the need for clear communication and understanding of one's worth. There were so many great stories that Michelle shared in this, and I think you're going to love this episode coming up while we talk about this. And for those of you that want to go on this path of really getting into your values, we have a workbook that is free that you can download right from our businessbalancebliss.com site /workbook and start your journey today. It's packed with exercises and reflections that not only do I share here on the podcast and do others share, but it will guide you through making your own. I look forward to seeing how that works out for you and also to hear your insights on today's podcast. Welcome, everyone, to this episode of Breaking Beliefs. I'm so excited to be here with my friend, Michelle Golden-River. Michelle, do you want to give a little background on yourself before we get started?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I work in the accounting space. I've been working with CPA firms, public accounting for a lot of years. I want to say about 30 years. No, it's a little more than that now. And before that, I had an accounting background working in 2 public companies in the accounting department. So that was really cool and interesting and insightful. They were both in the healthcare sector. I grew up in Southern California, and I was raised by parents who were of the hippie culture. So I was raised by a village, and I grew up with a very modest upbringing. And as an only child, although I do have siblings, I either didn't have them yet or didn't know about them until adulthood. So
good. Lots to unpack there.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. So I grew up as an only, and it's kind of interesting that I went into the accounting profession with that, very non-traditional, boho background. So I work with accountants and love them. That's it in a nutshell.
Well, cool. So, well, let's get into that. So,
Oh,
when you say your parents were hippies, what does that mean? And did they have jobs? Like, what were they doing?
oh, good question. Yeah, so my mom and dad were still pretty, nerdy and, like, good mostly, pretty good productive citizens as, high school students. My mom had me very young. She was 18, I think, or 19, my dad was 19, and they were only together a short while. They split up when I was a little baby, and, my dad was always around for, the first several years, but then he joined the Peace Corps when I
Wow.
think I was 7, and, so my dad was always in my life, but my mom remarried or met my stepdad when I was about 3, and we lived in a one-bedroom apartment over a garage in downtown Santa Ana, California. We had hanging bead lamps and, you name it for hippie culture, and it was part of the life. There was, uh pot was around. I was I didn't really think anything of it because it was just part of the life, but, my parents did work, so that's really good, but there was a lot of parties, a lot of, crazy parties. I won't go into those details and incriminate anybody, but I just ran around as a kid. I was scruffy and dirty. I probably had, greasy hair and barefoot, played in the dirt, and my dirt was a great toy back in the early '70s. Dirt and sticks, they could be
What did
anything.
you make?
Sticks. Oh, your stick was everything, right? Your stick was a broom, it was a rifle, it was everything. So, yeah, it was a kind of a neat way to grow up in that there was a lot of love around. I always felt very loved, although I didn't have anything, I didn't notice.
hmm So, when you say like you might have had dirty hair or so forth, were the other kids like that at school, or did you feel different at
Oh,
school?
no. No, I did not fit in at school at all. I was a definitely a standout, like, hand-me-downs, and I don't think, I think probably until all through elementary, junior high, and high school, I felt very insecure and inferior about my appearance for a lot of reasons, and I knew I was different that way. I had a couple people in my life, though, that
hmm
my mom's best friend, Linda, she's my godmother. She had 3 kids, and she was a very good mom, like, very traditional. Her kids were clean, she sewed clothes for them. She was a mom to me too. So, like, I
hmm
had some other moms that my mom was pretty focused on her and the generation, and there was this one time, Amy, where I think I was about 4, I might have been 5, but my parents liked to sleep in, my mom and stepdad, and I had the bedroom and they slept in the living room, and I had snuck out of the house in my footy jammies, my sleeper, and
hmm
I had gone 3 or 4 blocks away to the, junior high school nearby, and some students from the junior high school brought me home and knocked on the door, and my mom opened, half asleep, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, where why did you leave?" And they put a hook lock on the outside of my bedroom door so they could sleep in and I wouldn't escape. So
Oh my god!
that
And what made you do that? Like, what was it? Like, why did you leave that night?
probably I was lonely or bored or,
hmm
I don't know. I don't remember why, I just remember
Yeah,
the event.
yeah. That was nice. They brought you back.
Was nice that they brought me back.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I always think that's interesting. You referenced Linda. What kind of examples did you have from other people outside of your family that stuck with you to model after?
Oh, awesome, awesome question. So, I had probably had 3 mom types, Linda being one, 2 others, my best friend's mom, Phyllis. She was super traditional. We lived across the street from them, and we moved to Orange, California, when I was 7 when my dad joined the Peace Corps. We moved in with my great-grandma who
Okay.
was aging and that she didn't wanna go in a nursing home. So, she was from Denmark, super interesting, very all the neighborhood kids were afraid of this old lady, but she was just a really sweet person and super interesting. So I got to actually live with her and learn her stories for a few years. And then there was a little girl across the street from me, and her mom, Phyllis, was like from Tennessee and very traditional. She cooked dinner every day. That wasn't something that I was used to. And, back to Linda, like she would cut my hair and, make me clothes and stuff. So my mom made me some clothes too. But Phyllis was a really good role model of like, she was the closest thing to like a Brady mom
Yeah.
that I saw in real life. And then another,
So for those of you that are not old enough, that means
oh,
Brady Bunch. It was a TV show in the 70s.
but he knows the Brady Bunch, right? No, it's like Zoom. They had,
Yeah,
with 9 squares in a
exactly.
window at the beginning. And then a family member, long convoluted story I won't go into, but my stepdad's brother's wife, Sandy, she kind of took me in. And all the thing in common with all these women is that they were more nurturing in a motherly way, I think, than what I felt like my mom was. And they listened to me and were there for me, and they were good examples. Linda in particular, she had twin boys the exact same age as me and then a younger one, and she went to UCI, had multiple jobs, sewed costumes for the theater department on the side for money. She was very industrious, entrepreneurial, started her own interior design business. Just I watched her be like a super mom, even though she was part of the hippie culture. She was a hard worker, an incredible work ethic, and I valued that. And then one last influence to your question was my uncle Ron. My mom has
Mm.
one sister, and her husband was an accountant. And he was probably one of the very few white collar people I had in my life. And I looked to him. He was so funny, just really dry sense of humor. He just passed away like a couple
Aw.
years ago, so right around COVID. And great sense of humor, wonderful guy. Ended up being the mayor of Tustin, California, and mayor pro tem, and really, really neat guy. Anyway, I admired him, and he was an accountant, so I wanted to be an accountant. I had no idea what that
Oh,
meant.
that's why you wanted to be? So, did you want to be because of his lifestyle, or did he ever take you to what the work was like, or
Not lifestyle so much. Okay, so I always had a fascination with office supplies, and he had I did. You could take me in an office supply store, and I'll walk around for 2 hours. It's awesome. He
nothing
had
better
a
than getting new pencils and all that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and lined paper. I think
Yeah.
something drew me about the organization of forms and
Mhm.
green bar. This is something else that
Mhm.
young people in your audience won't know what I'm talking about. But he had a 10 key, and I thought that was pretty awesome. It wasn't lifestyle. He worked in industry, and he wasn't in a CPA firm, but I'm not even sure he was a CPA. He was an accountant for companies. Just
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, did you have any hobbies or things that you did as a child or like to do?
Not well, I mean, just I played, I rode my bike, and I drew. I drew a lot, but
Mhm.
that was about it. I didn't really have hobbies as a kid.
Okay. So, how did you make that transition from high school to college if you really didn't have examples of that? Like,
Yeah, I never I n it the way I grew up, well, my parents went to community college even when I was a little kid. My
okay.
stepdad, when I was 5, he would ride his bike to school and his to Santa Ana College, and my elementary school was closer to that than it was to our house, so he would put a pillow on the bar on his bike, and I would sit on the pillow. I was 5 years old, and he would ride me, drop me off at kindergarten, and go to class. And then both my mom and Linda took a lot of classes at Santa Ana College, and so I spent a lot of time on campus playing and running around being I had no business there, right? But I just grew up on the campus a fair bit. So I think I always appreciated school, but I didn't know the difference between a community college and a four-year college, and I never had a sense that a college path was something that I could do because
Mhm.
money. So I became a mom really young. I'll go backwards for a second. When I was 16, I had challenges in high school. Basically, I was a good student. I was very nerdy and a good little student, I think. But the teachers in my high school would get mad at some of the disruptive kids, mostly boys, in the class. And I remember in high school, it was in a particular math class that some boys were in trouble, and basically the whole class got punished because the boys were in trouble. And I felt this strong sense of injustice in that. And I went to the counselor and said, I don't want to be in that class. Can you transfer me? Because I'm being punished unfairly. I'm not disruptive and I'm doing my work. And they said, no, like, suck it up. And I didn't feel like that was a sufficient answer. So I actually left the normal high school at 16 and finished coursework. I took the test, the California High School Proficiency Exam. I was
Mhm.
15 and a half, and legally you have to stay in school until you're 16, and then you can do whatever you want. So I went to community college at 16, but I finished out that year doing using the continuation school that all the bad kids went to. I took independent study from that school, and so that's how I finished high school
Wow.
at 15 and then
This
started
is so
college.
you.
I Why do you say
I mean, I happen to know Michelle, but, like, just that, like, fighting for justice, like, that's
that? Taking a different course, right?
yeah, 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 yeah.
I
I
had this
love it. Yeah.
amazing head start, Amy, and I got pregnant when I was 17, and I had this
And
head start,
so who
and
was
I
the
screwed it up.
father? Like, how'd you meet the father?
Just a guy that I met at a party. It was, like, really
Okay.
random, not
Yeah.
something. I didn't have a steady boyfriend or anything like that. So I found myself, I thought, "Oh, I'll just, keep going to school and have this baby," because the school had daycare, but then I didn't even make good plans or investigate, and I found out, oh, they don't take your child till they're potty trained, and that's 2 years. So
Mm.
I immediately, started working and got jobs in, like, clerical positions through a temp agency, and a temp agency placed me into a public or in yeah, into a large Steelcase, actually, which is a company that manufactures office equipment, and, um and then another company that I ended up going in-house with, I was a telemarketer for them. They made, contact lenses, but they also had a product of tattooed eyeliner, and I used to call people who responded with a postcard and a magazine to talk to them about this tattooed eyeliner that was done by doctors, done by, actual eye doctors back in the day. It was called Natural Eyes, and they had an ad, a posted position in their lunchroom when I was a temp. So I was about 18, and they had this posted thing for an accounts receivable clerk. And their HR department vetted me and rejected me. So I wandered the halls and found the supervisor, knocked on his door. I don't know where I got this courage, but I knocked on his door and said, I don't have any skills, but I would love to learn. And he kindly hired me. I credit him to this day. His name was Keith Kay. He's passed away now, but he gave me a break. And if he
Yeah,
didn't
and
give me that
everyone's
break,
got to, right?
I wouldn't be here.
Yeah. Well, I often think, because just even so far in your story, when you said, like, "I don't know where I got it from," but, like, how did you have the initiative to do that? Like, you really, like, at 4 years old, did the same thing.
I walked out of the house. Oh my gosh, you're right.
It's almost like you're born with this soul that, like,
Uh,
you can't really it's not in your arm, your nails, you can't see it, but it's definitely you,
that's
like
funny. I
yeah.
never saw that before. I don't know where I don't know.
It's amazing. Yeah, like, to have that inner strength to survive, in the way that you needed to, so
That's neat. Thank you for saying that. I think that when I got pregnant very young, I had a turning point. It just never even crossed my mind to not go through with the pregnancy. And so I was going to have this child. I always wanted brothers and sisters, and I always wanted a large family because I had
right.
no siblings that I knew of.
Mhm.
And I was like, okay, so this is my path. I can do this, but I was terrified. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I was absolutely, I
Mhm.
had no idea what I was in for. The reality is someday I want to write a book for pregnant teen moms.
Yeah.
Like, this is what you're thinking, this is what is out there for
Yeah.
you, etcetera. But I faced all that, and when I one of the a lot of people told me, "You can't do this." Like, I actually remember somebody saying, "You're gonna have an unruly, undisciplined child," because 'cause I'd not really been around children that much. I mean, I
Mhm.
babysat a couple kids, but that was about it, and I felt something well up inside of me that was like, "I'm gonna have the best kid." It wasn't, "I'm gonna be the best mom." It
Mhm.
was a challenge, like, they were challenging me that I was gonna be a terrible mom, but I was like, "I'm gonna have the best kid." Ironically, that person that was telling me I was gonna kind of not be a successful parent, their kid was jumping all over the person's couch. And I'm like, "That I'm not gonna have that kinda kid," you know?
Yeah.
It was kind of juvenile, but I think it's where I really grew a sense of courage and determination to be successful at this thing. I didn't know
Mhm.
what it looked like. I didn't know what I didn't know, but out of that came this fighting spirit that I didn't know I
Mhm.
had. And that has stayed with me both as a parent and as a professional, that it's like, "No, you can do this." Like, somebody can't tell you you can't do something.
Right. Well, and I think it's interesting because you were saying how insecure you were in high school, and that something that, from the outside world, people can feel bad for you about, like, that you were a single mom, young, actually was a turning point for you,
It changed my life.
gain strength. Yeah.
Yeah, I would, it absolutely changed. It should be something that, and for most people, I think it can be a setback, and there's
Mhm.
story after story about how, it ruins your life. I had people tell me, "You're ruining your life." And I was like, "Really? Okay." I didn't know what not ruining my life would look like. I was just determined to love this child and raise this kid, and, you know, I feel bad for him in a way because he's 40 now and he's
Yeah.
amazing. He's an amazing person. But, like, we were children together,
Mhm. Yeah.
but we fought side by side together. I always looked at it as him and me against the world or whatever.
Right. Yeah, 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 yeah. So, okay, so you get this chance, as this AR clerk, so what did you learn from that experience?
Right, right. I loved it. I really enjoyed it. I was there for a few years, and then I became a staff accountant at a different public company. Keith had left that company, and so I didn't really have his protection and guidance and leadership. So I didn't find that I enjoyed it as much. I loved the work. I was probably a terrible corporate employee. I
And
I
why do you
don't
say
think.
that?
Mm, I don't think I love kind of the, and this was the '80s when everybody was wearing, women were wearing IBM suits and ties and
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
It was
yeah.
really bizarre. I just felt like the corporate world had an element of inauthenticity to it, and I didn't realize that until later when I joined a CPA firm, and I felt like the difference of corporate accounting department versus CPA firm, it just had this welcoming authenticity to it.
Mhm.
I didn't work in Big 4,
Mhm.
so I worked in an 80-person, 3-office firm in Central Missouri, but
Right.
first. But,
Yeah.
being in a large corporation in Southern California, it felt like high school. Not
Mhm.
not in the social way, but it felt like high school with the HR department and the rules and the
Mhm.
expected norms were just more like high school and
Yeah.
less like college or less like a friendly entrepreneurial environment. And I think because 'cause I'm an entrepreneur in my spirit, I didn't love the corporate
Mhm.
style.
Yeah. So how long were you doing that before you went?
Um, let's see. I did that. I started that work when I was probably 1985, and I didn't join a CPA firm until 1995. So about 10 years in
Oh,
different
okay.
accounting departments.
So how did you make that transition?
I had worked with a second job. The second job I took, Comprehensive Care Corporation, was in Irvine, California. It was during the pink slip era, and everybody was being let go, and they were moving their corporate headquarters from expensive Irvine, California to rural, outlying county in St. Louis, outside of St. Louis City. And my son was 5. I was a single mom. It was very expensive to live in Southern California, and I was barely making it. And I had an opportunity to relocate with the company, and recognizing that my income, they said you could transfer from California to Missouri on your same salary. And so recognizing my income would go so much further, I moved there with my little boy all alone, and I
Wow.
was like 23. And I worked for that company, same company, but they were spinning off an arm and doing an IPO, and I got to work on that for the vice president of, the COO of the company, and vice president of finance. I got to kind of do some of that work, and that was really exciting for me. It felt
Mhm.
very different. And then I had married and remarried. I'd married like my son's dad for like 5 minutes. We were married a few months.
Oh,
It
okay.
was I dabbled in marriage, and I remarried, and my husband's job transferred him to Columbia, Missouri. So when I moved to Columbia and I had my second and third child, it was really hard to juggle work and being a mom now with 3 kids, but I found this job in an accounting firm. And
Mm,
because I had an accounting background, but no accounting degree, because I had just taken classes over
right.
I tried to take college classes, but I never fully finished. They could hire an accounting grad from Mizzou for like, this is going way back, $19,000 out of school. And I already made more than that. So bringing me in as an accountant didn't make sense. They brought me in on the administrative side. And so I could speak accounting. And I ended up working for the partner in charge of, he was an audit partner who was also in charge of marketing.
Okay.
And I had a natural affinity for that because positioning is something near and dear to my heart. It's always been near and dear to my heart. And I loved this ability to sort of bridge that gap, from like accounting for me is like comfort food.
Mhm.
It's organized, it's methodical, it lacks chaos. Well, you can take chaos and fix it.
Right.
And
Exactly.
and I just love that. For me, it's just like a calming thing.
Mhm.
I've always like been inclined to that. And anyway, I just really enjoyed that was my transition, and I really enjoyed that. And that firm, accounting marketing, was not a career that had been around very long. Accounting marketing as a career began in 1989 with Bates versus State Bar of Arizona, when the laws changed that accounting firms could begin marketing, accounting and
Oh,
law
wow.
firms. They
Mhm.
could not market prior to that. So, with that change came this new career path to be for accounting firms to do marketing. And so, accounting firms had no idea what that looked like. Let's just say the bar was low.
Yeah.
And so when somebody came in and had ideas and could show a path to a planned growth and
Mhm.
marketing through positioning and stuff, it opened doors for accounting firms to grow, but it also opened doors as a career path. And I kind of started learning new things and creating that path for myself.
So how did you learn it having no background in it?
I joined Association for Accounting Marketing, and
Mhm.
under the mentorship and tutelage of uh, several people who had been around the profession for a long time and had maybe done marketing before marketing was allowed. One man named Bruce Marcus was preeminent in this space. He he passed away several years ago, but he's an incredible thought leader, and he had worked for, I think, Arthur Andersen in the 70s. And
Mm.
Bruce Marcus had laid some incredible groundwork along with several other people who were still around. And I soaked it up like a sponge and brought ideas back to my firm and kind of help them pave their first formal marketing path.
So, knowing typically how accountants think and having really no experience in this before, how did you bring them on that journey? to
Like,
be
how'd I
able.
convince them to let me
Yes.
do it? Um, that's a really good question. I went to the managing partner, David, at the time, and I said, "You could either buy a marketer or grow one, and I want you to grow one, and I want that to be me." And he said, "Okay."
You did it again.
Because I did. I'm picturing myself walking out the door in my jammies.
Exactly.
That's hilarious. You're connecting dots for me I hadn't connected.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Go after what you want.
he was really neat. That firm, Williams Keepers in Columbia, Missouri, that firm is super special. This was around 1994 when I joined the firm, and that firm was doing something that very few firms were doing yet, and that was specializing. They didn't call it specializing yet. They called it being famous in an industry, being famous in a
Mhm.
niche. And Williams Keepers was an early adopter of that, and they were also an early adopter of some non-traditional services like valuations and litigation support and stuff like that, and when other firms weren't doing it. So I got really lucky for being in this little
Mhm.
college town,
Yeah.
not in a big city, and having the opportunity to be in a firm that was innovative and
Mhm.
forward thinking was pretty, it was a pretty neat coincidence or opportunity for me. So
Yeah. So what did you implement there? What did you change? And
Oh gosh, not much. I mean, I helped them with marketing plans. I was building their first website. I was trying to build their first website. I redid their logo. They still have the same logo. I love them. But and I told them, I'm like, you guys could look at a refresher. I won't be offended. And they're like, no, we
Yeah.
really love it. um, it was probably I was working on their first website. This is when websites were brand new. We didn't even know
Mhm.
what to do on websites. Basically, most people were doing a brochure online,
Yeah.
which was about the best thinking at the time, and I didn't wanna do that. I didn't finish that project, much to my regret. My husband and I split up, and we both had to move back to St. Louis as a result of that.
Mm.
So I had to leave the firm, and after about 4 years. And it was hard for me because I loved the firm. So I went into a
Yeah.
law firm for a year, and that was an experience. But then I came running back to my accounting friends, and they welcomed me back with, open arms.
To the same firm?
That's when I started consulting. No, I
Oh, okay.
decided when I left the law firm, I decided I was gonna just be, like, the marketing department for several small firms instead of
Mhm.
a marketer for one firm. Because if a marketer does their job right, it would be like drinking from a fire hose of leads for a firm,
Mhm.
and I felt like they could get more for their money if I did the job for several smaller firms that paid
Mhm.
me a piece of, like, I guess you would call it a fractional CFO in the
Yeah.
accounting space, accounting
Yeah.
services
CMO.
provision.
Yeah.
We didn't call it fractional then. I kinda
Yeah.
don't like that term, to be
Yeah.
honest. I feel like it means a portion of, like, you're not
Yes.
getting the whole enchilada, but
Yeah.
I was an outsourced marketer for several years and loved it, and that's when I really honed specialties of positioning, and that grew into honing the specialty of pricing, which is what I help CPA firms do now, which you can't price. I help them not charge by the hour, I help them price based on worth, and you can't do that unless you can define worth, and you can't define worth unless you view yourself differently, which is a
Mhm.
big part of I think a driver of who I am is having a curiosity and trying to look at things from lots of different angles to see them a new way. Like taking something familiar and looking at it a new way, if that makes sense. That's my
Mhm.
personal why, a la Simon's.
Yeah. So, I was at a workshop or doing a workshop last week, and this topic was coming up, and the whole timesheet discussion. But this is exactly where we were going. Like, you have to know who you are, your processes, your clients, and repeatability of work in order to make value pricing work. So, what are some of the key things that you try to implement so that it can work and they get the result?
Sure, and looking at that from a breaking beliefs angle, first is breaking the belief that we sell time, because we
Mhm.
don't. We
Mhm.
sell how the client is different at the end of the work. We don't sell our time to make that change. Kind of similar to you and me.
Right.
But when I go out and I teach, because I consider myself more of a teacher and
Mhm.
a guy, Sherpa, a guide
Right.
than anything else these days. I am not the product. The
Mhm.
time they spend face to face with me is not the product. The product is them after that time. The product
Mhm.
is how they're different or transformed.
Result.
Um, yeah, and that's
Mhm.
the product. So that's something that accountants don't think about, and that's a perfect
Mhm.
example of looking at something familiar in a new way. They,
Mhm.
I believe, when I first set foot in Williams Keepers and I started helping them, I saw this low level of confidence in their worth. And the way
Mhm.
I saw that exhibited, because I worked on their proposals and I would talk to them about it and I would see them come up with a price and figure out, and I was like, "God, they really undervalue themselves. Like, they are changing lives. Like, they're
Mhm.
changing businesses. They're helping an entrepreneur be something, live a dream, right? And all
Mhm.
this stuff." And I was like, "You so devalue yourself." And
Mhm.
I was thinking, like, how can I get them to see themselves differently? And this applies to much more than just accountants, of course, but how can I get them to see themselves differently? And something I learned, and I didn't learn this early enough. I wish I'd learned this 20 years earlier. But the ability to do that doesn't come from telling somebody you're worth more. I mean, that
Mhm.
helps, but it's not the telling, it's not the assertion you are worth more. It's helping them, showing them the path so that they come to the conclusion that they're worth more.
Mhm.
It's opening the pathway and facilitating that. And I started taking classes to learn how to be a facilitator in the early 2000s. I guess we call it the aughts or something. And that's when I started to really change myself from being a person who's, I call it mommy like,
Mhm.
telling people what to do and how to do it, to trying to extract, the facilitators would say, extract the wisdom in the room. The
Mhm.
wisdom is in the room. It's your job to unlock it and help
Right.
them come to their conclusions.
Right. Yeah.
So, it moving from charging by the hour, getting rid of timesheets, to a form of pricing that's based more on worth is contextual. The worth is contextual with the client.
So I think, at least with a lot of consulting clients I work with or coaching, like you can get them to that point. Sometimes the breaking point is, well, then how would I know if we're making money?
Process, right? Yeah. That's a great question. So the second belief that
Yeah.
you wanna break there is that your profitability is best viewed by moment increments in time. If you're an accounting person, your profitability is your total, end total, is your net. It's, you look at a financial statement, and
Mhm.
a former managing partner at my second CPA firm, now called Pinion, but it was Kennedy and Co. when I joined, and then Keiko Isom. Managing partner Kurt Seamers at the time, he said, "You have this report and it's got all these lines on it, line, and then a total that says income. And then some more lines, the line, expense. And you want the income to be bigger than the expense. And that's how you know if you're profitable." At the macro level, taking it down to this micro level where you have to study this implementation versus that implementation, or this tax return versus that tax return, taking it down to this micro level is unhelpful on a perpetual basis. So what I'll say is, do a study. Do a certain type of a project of a certain size. So I'm going to use a tax return for an example. You might do a tax return for a simple, medium, and complex level. So let's just
Mhm.
put three buckets and do a study of the simple ones. Do it 10 times, do it 20 times if you want. And look at, like, okay, you need to plan your capacity. So looking at your project and realizing you can be profitable by coming up with averages and ranges, minimum to maximum amount of time, or the difference in time between when a seasoned person does it and a newbie does it. And looking at that spread and then saying, okay, on average, how many of those can we do in X period of time with X number of people? And then is it worth it to us to do it at a price? What price point is it worth it to do it for
Mm-hmm.
us? And that's not worth-based pricing. That is just figuring out what's needed to keep us viable. Worth-based pricing is setting all of that aside and then talking to the client about the worth to them of having of a transformation from point A to point B. Tax return's not an exciting transformation. You're uncompliant and now you're compliant, or non-compliant and now you're compliant. That's not a big
Right.
transformation. Transformation is moving your accounting system to the cloud, having real-time data, et cetera, et cetera. So different services have different potential outcome. And when I said it's contextual, what I mean is, what does moving it to the cloud mean for this client versus that client? Because it's not the same.
Mm-hmm.
For one client, it's I get my life back. And for another client, it's now I can have 3 people working on it instead of 1. There's different reasons and rationale behind why we do things. And
Right.
that's where the key of worth is. So once you figure out what the transformation is, then you can figure out what it might be worth to that individual, which is not the same
Mm-hmm.
across 2 people. This is hard, Amy. This is time consuming. It's not canned. Then you go back and you go, okay, well, if it's going to take me, this many people and this long to do it, and I can only do 5 in a year or 5 in a month, is it worth it to me to do it at a value point that's worth it to the client? That's
Yeah.
where the two things that are very different connect: worth it to the firm and worth it to the customer.
Right.
So this takes practice and training and total mindset change. And it takes some new processes and systems. Our mindset, because the accounting profession was taught 5 generations ago, you sell time. That's a belief they have to break.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's also in how you manage, one of the discussions that I got in with them last week was the timesheet is not a management tool.
Mm-mm.
And
It
so
could have
we use
been
it
if they
as
actually used
but
it.
it's not true. Like,
Right.
a lot of that time isn't even true that's being
Yep.
put on there. And that's been through the generations. It's not just one generation that makes up time. Everybody has since the beginning because they feel
Yeah.
pressure, they feel they'll lose their job, whatever that is.
They'll fit, and the fib is in both directions.
Right. Exactly.
Underreporting, over-reporting.
Yes. Yeah. So, but the real, like, the other piece of this is like learning leadership and management, because that means you have to delegate more to create space to manage your staff, because you will know if someone isn't keeping up with their project, isn't meeting deadlines, doing it incorrectly, when you are taking the people time and not just
Absolutely.
looking at a report. So
Absolutely. So
really,
breaking
like, a
down your
lot of training.
process.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
breaking down your process, and then the key, there's 3 gaps to bridge. One is the way we think about worth to the
Mhm.
client, instead of just all the focus being on worth to us, but thinking about worth to the client is new. And then how that connects to worth it to us, which I just tried
Mhm.
to describe. And then the other one is breaking down your project into scope parameters. We don't do that. When we have
Mhm.
timesheets, we don't have a reason to do that. We just go forth and conquer, and then we go back and look at our time. We haven't been diligent about planning any particular projects and then executing the projects,
Mhm.
managing to the scope. So it's interesting if you think about what were the first kinds of projects that accountants were comfortable, because it's comfort level with this, comfortable pricing up front. And the very first, I think the best I can see, the very first projects that CPAs were like, oh, yeah, I'm comfortable giving a number, is an audit.
I was gonna
And
say.
what did they have in their toolbox to make them comfortable with pricing an audit up front? Back in the day when everything was still a green bar and whatever, we had PPC guides in our libraries with all these pages of process. A very thought through, detailed process. And once they have the process detailed, they're like, okay, now I'm comfortable saying it's worth it to me to do this project at that price because the process
Mhm.
is defined. Where they failed, unfortunately, we fail, is that we deviate from the process, which is actually, I think, great. It's what distinguishes the CPA firm from, say, a pilot.com. We
Mhm.
deviate from the process because we love to be service oriented
Mhm.
and flexible and
Yeah.
give customers what they want, but we don't charge for it.
Mhm.
That's the mistake. We don't say, "You know what? We're happy to tailor this for you. What that would look like would be X dollars. Is that something you're interested in?"
Mhm.
And we just say, "Oh gosh, now we have to do all this tailoring for free." And why do we do that? Because accountants are wonderful, altruistic people with huge hearts
Mhm.
who love to be service oriented, and they do it to their detriment.
Please. Yes.
They write off accountants as a profession
Yeah.
writes off 20% of the work they do. That is a day a week. We write off Friday, and we've normalized that.
Yes. So what's the third thing? So worth the client, breaking down
Oh,
projects, the scope.
it was defining the project and then managing to the project. I didn't give you
Okay.
the number. Thank you for
Yeah.
circling me back to it.
Cool. So I know we could just keep on talking. So unfortunately, we've got to bring it to a close. But I think the work that you do is so, I think, when someone says, oh, send Michelle, she'll help you with pricing, it just sounds like it's pricing. But it is a lot more. It's a lot more, thought process that goes into it and how you're going to run your business in order to make sure that you can be successful and bring people along with you. And you do such a great job of doing that. And you
Oh,
can
thank
see how
you.
passionate you are. So Michelle doesn't do anything she doesn't think is worth it, as her
I
story
don't.
shows.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
I do try and live it. The funniest thing about being a consultant in a space, a pricing space, is that I cannot give a savvy person and managing partner or whatever a proposal without them challenging my price,
Yeah.
specifically to see how I will field that.
Yes.
They do it like I just expect it because they do it. I could name a few managing partners that did a really good job of it. At first, I would get so insulted and whatever, and I'm like, "They have to, because if I can't handle it when they challenge my price,
Yeah.
I have no business teaching it."
But that's part of the teaching.
It is.
Yeah, yeah, even when
It
you
is.
have to walk away, that
Yeah.
this is my worth, and is it worth it to me to do this?
I love that you said that, and how often do people walk away?
Yeah,
It's very rare.
and it's a hard thing to do. I think if you do not know who you are and what your worth is, you run a business based on scarcity
Yes,
and fear, that another client won't walk in the door or that client might leave if I raise their price. What you find is that those people are business people too, and they know what they're worth and they know what they charge and they expect to be having that business discussion with you.
absolutely, and I think a key belief change in that is if you don't respect your
Mhm.
client's not gonna respect your worth.
No, and then they'll keep pushing when they see that you will write things off.
Yeah. Yeah,
Like,
they will.
you're
Train them
disciplining it. Yeah.
we train them. I have a blog post from many, many years ago. It's called "Retraining Clients When You've Taught Them to Abuse You."
Yeah.
Because we write
Yeah.
it off, like, for instance, a client doesn't have their work prepared for you, PBC
Yeah.
list, in the
Uh-huh.
profession we call it, and we'll just start doing the things that they didn't finish, and then that's what we end up writing off or billing. I call it billing and ducking. When you send
Yeah.
a bill and you go like this, "Please pay it, please pay it, please pay it," and we'll write it off, and then next year we're surprised when they're not
Yeah.
ready.
Yeah.
No, we taught them they don't have to do the prep work that they've agreed to do, and we won't even charge them for it.
Well, but it's also the fear of the conversation. Like, I feel like so many of the issues, and these aren't just in accounting, really anywhere, that happen is because we're afraid to communicate. to
Yeah.
actually stop and say, this is our scope. If, you want us to do this, it's going to cost this much more. Do you want to do it? And just having that very upfront and clear conversation and
Yes,
saying, if you don't do it, then this is the price, but not ducking sending the bill, that you've already had that proactive conversation, which, takes, again, confidence in yourself, worth in yourself to do that,
it does. I
and
I
training.
have a I have a theory on why we just write it off or whatever and avoid that conversation like the plague. And my theory is this: if we don't, and usually we don't in this profession, talk to the client first about what the scope really is, about what's included and what's not
Yes,
included. If we don't have that conversation up front, but then
and when they come in the door.
and yes, yeah, and when they come in the door,
Yeah.
when we start to have overages, we know we were unclear and
Mhm.
we feel like we're changing the rules in the middle of the game if we then go, "Hey, that wasn't part of the deal," when we never outline the deal. And that's why I say, like, we have this giant skill gap of outlining for the client what is and what isn't part of the deal.
Yeah.
And if we fix that skill gap, if we get better at doing that and saying, "Hey, you've picked the middle option of implementation or the middle option of whatever service, it looks like this," and then they can see in black and white what was in the big option that they didn't pick. They now at least have some clarity about some things that are not included. We have more of a leg to stand on when we spend the energy to show the client what is and isn't part of the thing. Because if I come to you and I say, "Hey, me, will you do my taxes?" And you go, "Sure." What do I think is included?
Anything and everything.
Everything.
Yes.
Because if we don't say what's not included, the client is always going to assume, "Oh,
Yeah.
that includes everything."
Yeah.
So where do you draw the line?
Exactly. Yeah.
And we feel scummy going back after the fact and going, time out. That
Yeah.
wasn't part of the deal." And you're like, "But you didn't tell me that."
But then they also continue to do it year after year. So if you catch it, then even if you do it the first year, the next year re-engaging is like, this is where we messed up last year. We should have
Mm.
told you. It was on us. But going forward,
Yes,
we want to be much clearer on what's included in this engagement. So you can fix it, but it still takes communication to
it
fix it.
does. And
Yeah.
we are, I think, with some of the changes in capacity constraints and extremely high client volume that we have right now for a variety
Mhm.
of reasons I won't unpack. But because of those things, I think we're getting a lot bolder about those conversations than maybe we were 3, 4, 5 years ago. I think we're willing to kinda stand up for ourselves a little better and bring those things to light. And practitioner by practitioner, some people are really good at it, and
Yeah.
other people are just terrified of it. So it really
Yeah.
has to do with who you grow up under as far as, role modeling and their comfort with their worth.
Yeah. Awesome. So I'm just going to ask you just some rapid fire questions to close out today. So I want you to pick a category: family and friends, money, spiritual, or health.
That's hard. Let's do family.
Okay. Things or actions I don't have that I want to have.
More time and less distance, with friends. I would love to have more time, and I wish I had an Ethel Mertz neighbor. That's if anybody watched I Love Lucy, Ethel would just come in the back door and sit down and have a cup of coffee. I
Yes.
wish I had an Ethel Mertz. Mm.
Yeah. I get you. Things or actions I do have that I want to keep.
Yeah, just people around who to love and who love me for despite my flaws for who I am.
And vice versa, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Things or actions I don't have that I don't want to have.
People, friends, family who are
Mhm.
disingenuous.
Mhm.
I don't love being around people who are
Yeah.
inauthentic.
Mhm.
It's a
Yeah.
hard for me. It, like, it saps
Yeah.
my
Gets right in ya. Yeah.
yeah.
All right, last one. Things or actions that I do have that I don't want, that I wanna get rid of.
Oh, man. Sometimes I am just too, uh, wear my feelings on my sleeve maybe a little too much.
Mhm.
Maybe I could hold back a little.
But would that be you?
Right? I know it. That's not an excuse to be
Yeah, 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 yeah.
obnoxious.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much for doing this today. Is there anything that you want to emphasize or you want to make sure people take away from this conversation today, or something we didn't say that you want to conclude with?
I would say, no one's view of you or societal expectations are real limitations. Like the power is in us to change or redirect at any time. So, see things in a new way. Try and look at things in a new way, and it can open as many doors as possible. And I would say there's two song lyrics. We'll see if you can name the bands, Amy.
Oh
Two
gosh,
song
I'm
lyrics.
so bad at trivia. So
Oh, no, you'll know both of these. Maybe. When I was pregnant with my son, when I was 17, there were two song lyrics that just really resonated with me when I found that new, like, determination, and I
uh-huh.
wrote these down and hung them up on my wall, kind of as posters for myself. One was, "There's still time to change the road you're on."
I don't know.
Oh, okay, no problem. And the other one is, that was Led Zeppelin. That's my
Okay.
favorite band, but not my favorite song, but it's from Stairway to Heaven. There's still time to change the road you're on. And the other one is a Rush song, and that lyric is, "If you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice." And I really
Mhm.
think that, like, if you are an
Mm.
indecision is a decision. Being indecisive is unhelpful in every way.
Mhm.
So, it sets a course of sameness, right?
Right.
And I think that those thoughts can create movement.
Yeah, I think especially I don't think people talk about that enough, of like the indecisiveness and what that creates. And it is a decision to not make a decision.
Yeah. And
And
the decision can be the tiniest little baby step.
yes.
It can just
Yeah.
be like, "You know what? I'm gonna have something different for lunch today than I usually
Yeah.
have."
Exactly. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you sharing your story, and there's so many takeaways for the people that
Oh,
will listen
thank
to this.
you. Thank you for having me. It's always, good to spend time with you, Amy.
And now for my mindful moments with my interview with Michelle, which had so many interesting stories and turns in her story that I think all of us could appreciate. And it's always good to step back and think about the things that actually impacted you. And you could go back and really compare to your own story of the pivots that you have made. So when we started talking, she really kind of referenced her upbringing by parents that were part of what she called a hippie culture, and how that really changed her upbringing, that she was very much on her own many times, but she credits really the community and really contributing to her upbringing and different people in her life, such as the her godmother Linda, her best friend's mom Phyllis, her great grandmother from Denmark, and her stepdad's brother's wife Sandy. All these women provided different things that she needed over time, whether it be nurturing or guidance. But it was giving her examples of the pivots to make in her life to not necessarily repeat the same life as her parents. And I think that's so important that we go back and step back and think about where people have made an impact in our lives, that often we just keep moving through our life without reflecting back and giving gratitude to those people that did take an interest, that might have given us tidbits of information that made that impact on us. The other thing that was interesting about Michelle was that she left high school at 16, mainly because she felt there were some unfair things that were happening, and decided to finish her coursework at a continuation school. But life kind of threw a curveball at her, and when she got pregnant at 17, and she really found the courage and determination to overcome that challenge and overcoming just the fear of being a single mother and how others would basically talk negatively to her about becoming a mother, where she in her head really believed that she was gonna do the right thing and make sure that this baby and her were safe. And really, when you step back and listen to the journey, how much her getting pregnant really shifted her course and the decisions that she was making and really led to who she is today. She got these experiences starting out in accounting, and she had one of her first supervisors give her a break in her career. And I think this was so important that that person opened the door for her, that she was able to do this kind of work that maybe people didn't think she could do because she was a single mom or any kind of outside perception of her life. And because of that, that conversation and that person that giving her that opportunity changed her life forever and gave her strength to believe in herself and believe in her skills. And so when she talks about that career journey of being an AR clerk and the different paths that she went in order to gain more experience in accounting over time and making sure that she got the opportunities that she wanted. One of the things that was so interesting about listening to her story was her self-confidence to speak up for herself and also make sure she got what she wanted. And especially in a time when women didn't speak up for themselves as much as they probably do now, this is particularly, inspiring just to look at how far she came. And with everything going on, and maybe it was the need to make sure she had the career that she needed to have, that she was not wavering in what she could do and what she could provide. And later, what we talk about with value pricing, what her worth is. And I'd like all of you to kind of step back and think about what is your worth, and do you value it enough? Or are you valuing it in old ways or unconventional ways that might be new, that you're not giving yourself credit for all that you offer and what your unique gifts are that you can provide not only your employer, but the people around you. And when we shift that mindset from thinking about ourselves negatively or thinking about our life circumstances negatively, which Michelle could have done many times, but instead kept powering forward, and instead, because she kept gaining each time that she proved that she could do it, then it gave her more confidence the next time to go ask for what she wanted, which really leads into what she does today. And what she does today is really helping people value who they are and what services that they provide and not undervalue that. And part of that is really transforming those belief systems that maybe that we haven't uncovered over time that are holding us back, because this is the way that it's always been. And so we don't question it. And we value ourselves maybe based on time that we worked versus the actual output or product of the work and the value of what it creates for somebody else. And so we discussed the importance of self-worth and also being over communicative in business. And based on that, making sure that you are standing up for your own worth and not afraid to have these difficult conversations with clients, or even build up that is a difficult conversation with client. I can tell you so many times that when I work with clients myself and coach professionals on how to do this, that many times it's getting past their own fear of doing it. And when they actually ask for what they're worth, the client doesn't fight back. They believe they're worth that. The thing is, most people are going to take advantage of whatever you have to offer. So if you are not valuing your worth enough, then someone else is not going to volunteer it for you. So part of making sure that you can deliver on the value that you put there is making sure that you've got clear communication on what it is that you're delivering, what are the timelines, and what is the scope. Because one of the things that gets out of alignment when we talk about value is expectation. And if we don't make the expectation really clear on both sides, then we can fall flat and feel like that person didn't appreciate us or vice versa. So really important to think about, when we think about these complex issues of pricing and sales in our businesses, that a lot of times we have to get back to ourselves first and really be able to understand what is driving us, what is holding us back, and are there things that we need to get over in order to show up in the way that we want to show up, and not let outside influences affect what you think you're worth, and making sure that you stay aware of your value, of your unique gifts that you give. And really, the important thing is at the end of the day, making a decision, sticking to it, so that you become a leader in this and people are able to follow your example because of the work you did. And when you do that transformation, then everything else falls in line. I want to thank you so much for attending today's session. Like I said at the beginning, there is a workbook that you can download that's free on businessbalancebliss.com/workbook. We also have coaching programs to help you get into that authentic self and find those unique gifts. If you go to businessbalancebliss.com, you will see our upcoming coaching courses on these topics of work-life harmony, of intentional time management, of breaking through with your health, your finances, your brand, your joy, whatever it may be, because we want to be able to help you wherever you are at. So please share with anyone that you think that this podcast would be helpful, and I look forward to having you participate in our next episode. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. I hope you will take a moment to pause before entering back into your day to reflect on this podcast and note 1 to 2 actions you are inspired to do from today's conversation that you could incorporate into your life. To read the full blog and listen back to this episode or any other, you can find them at www.amyvetter.com/Breaking Beliefs podcast and related videos on my YouTube channel. For daily inspiration, follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Amy Vetter CPA. I hope that you will choose to like this and subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and more, so that you can join us for more inspiration on our next episode.